Going to give it just a couple minutes and we'll get underway shortly. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll get going in just a moment. All right, let's jump in. Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Wade Crowfoot and I lead our California Natural Resources Agency. And one of my favorite parts of this job is hosting these speaker series, which is all about updating you on what's happening across California and highlighting key priorities that we have here in state government and the Newsom administration. And the Colorado River falls into both of these categories. While it sometimes can sound far away, because of course Colorado's in its title, the river forms the southeast border of our state, what separates California from Arizona. It's California communities that were first to utilize water from the river and build infrastructure well over 100 years ago. And over half of Californians, maybe even you, when you turn on the water tonight, get at least some of their water from the Colorado River. So for these reasons, this is an important topic and it's an important time. And there's lots to unpack here today. Before we get started, if you haven't joined one of these speaker series before, a couple of recommendations. Turn your chat function on because my colleague Geeta Chandra, who deserves credit for bringing us together today, will be staffing the chat function. So she'll have background information on our speakers and their organizations and then different topics that come up. We also have a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So at any point over the next hour, if you have a question or an observation, you can click that button and send it to us. We'll see that as panelists. Some questions we'll be able to respond to on the keyboard, and others I'll bring into the group discussion. We record our conversation in the video here today, and so both the recording of the video and all the content provided in the chat will be available on our website, Natural Resources Agency website, by tomorrow morning. Last, before we dig into the discussion, I just want to highlight Black History Month, which starts on Monday. It's the 100th time that we celebrate in America Black History Month. And in our agency and across California, we're really proud of the tapestry of backgrounds that we bring as Californians and Americans. And I'm really proud to say that we have more events for Black History Month that you can participate in than ever. 14 events, both in-person events and virtual events across the state. So Geeta has put the link in the chat, and we hope you'll join us for the celebration of Black History Month. Okay, why are we talking about the Colorado River now? Basically, we are at the end of a 20-year period of an operating agreement across 7 states and the nation of Mexico. And we all rely on the river for water, both for communities and for agriculture. And by the end of this year, there needs to be a new operating agreement to manage the river for all of our benefits and, of course, the benefit of the environment beginning next year. So it's really crunch time for the Colorado River. At the same time, what we've experienced over the last couple of decades that we'll learn more about is the drying or aridification of the basin. Less precipitation, less snow and water on average coming into the basin, which means we have a smaller pie to divide among all of those who depend on the Colorado River. So it's really a challenging moment among 7 states and Mexico and our federal government to really find by this year the pathway to operate and manage the river moving forward. I'm really proud that California has stepped up in the past and even currently to reduce our water footprint on the Colorado River. And little spoiler alert from one of our panelists, California over the last year has used less water than ever in the last, I think, 6 or 7 decades, if I'm getting that right. So we'll talk a little bit more about the role California has to being a solution provider. And to help us understand the Colorado River Basin, what's happened and what will happen, we have a dynamite set of panelists. We're going to start with our key water leader in the state, Carla Namath at Department of Water Resources. Then we're going to bring in our state climatologist to give us a real-time understanding of what does the Colorado River Basin look like this year. We're going to talk to the chair of our Colorado River Board of California, who's the principal negotiator on behalf of California in these discussions with the other states about how to divide our water use. Then we're going to talk to two really important water leaders that lead water agencies in California that depend on the Colorado River. And then lastly, we're going to talk to our water expert from the sovereign Quechan Nation, which is our key tribal partner on all things Colorado River. So let's jump in and let me bring on to the screen my colleague, Carla Namath. Carla serves as the director of our California Department of Water Resources and the advisor to our Governor Newsom on all things water infrastructure. And Carla, we've got several hundred people joining us here today. Some probably live this issue, others are coming to it for the first time. So one thing I think you're going to do is help sort of level set our understanding of the Colorado River and topics we'll discuss today.
Sure. Okay, so I've got a handful of slides here. Thank you, Geeta. Thank you, Secretary, and thanks to others for joining. I'm going to talk at a good clip because there's so much expertise and perspective. And the reason there's so much expertise and perspective on this panel is just the extent of the river. You can see here it really starts in the Rockies and flows all the way into the Pacific in that Sea of Cortez there. And while it's not the longest river, it's about almost 1,500 miles long. The fact that it goes through 7 states and supports so many people, including tribal nations, it means it's complicated. The river itself is complicated in how it's managed. It's also an important producer of power to the Western power grid. So when we get into these situations of, reoperating the river, if you will, to address the threats of climate change and the threats of aridification in the basin, it becomes a complex set of parties that need to negotiate towards sustainability. That complexity is really established in what's called the law of the river. It's a complicated set of interstate compacts, court decrees, treaties, tribal water rights settlements, contracts, legislation. Lots of different things essentially establish the law of the river. So that's why we're so plugged in. If we go to the next slide. And so for California, we are a major user of Colorado River water. We have the oldest and biggest set of rights to this system. You'll hear a bit more from our Colorado River Board Chair, Hamby, who also represents Imperial Irrigation District. But you have to remember, Imperial Irrigation District, they have a long growing season. And because they have such a long growing season with few days below freezing, it means that the farmers in IID produce about 2/3 of the nation's winter vegetables. So there's a lot of different kinds of water uses for the Colorado, but California has been fundamentally engaged in using a significant amount of the supply. However, California has also been reducing significantly, and I think this year is probably our lowest use of Colorado River since 1949. And that's because we've been investing in all sorts of other kinds of water supplies, and we know that we have to. We know that we have to stabilize our system, and that decisions we make to recycle water or invest in desalination like San Diego did, all of it helps our whole water supply portfolio. Because California, even though we're the biggest, we have the biggest rights to Colorado River water, you can see there's a lot of different parts of the Western United States that depend on it. 3 of our biggest cities, LA, San Diego, and Phoenix, all depend on Colorado River water. Next slide, please. There are two big reservoirs that establish this system essentially. And that is why the federal government plays such a significant role. These are the two biggest reservoirs in America. They are Lake Powell, which is created by the Glen Canyon Dam, and Lake Mead, which is created by the Hoover Dam. And the water in Lake Powell flows through the Grand Canyon to Lake Mead. Lake Powell, just for context, can hold about 25 million acre feet of water, and Lake Mead can hold about 29 million acre feet of water. And just for comparison's sake, our biggest reservoir in California, which is Lake Shasta, it holds about 4.5 million acre feet of water. So this is a really big system. We have been experiencing, next slide, Geeta. We have been experiencing a prolonged drought in the Colorado watershed. We've been experiencing that here in California in our own watersheds, but it's been even more pronounced in the Colorado River watershed. And that's gotten everybody's attention really for the last 15 years. And the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation has been making some adjustments. One of the big critiques of the Colorado River is available supplies were determined during a relatively wet period of history, but reclamation has already started essentially when it looks at probabilities, it's already starting to weight more heavily what's been happening recently so that we can make sure that we are trending more accurate to what we think could come out of the river and how we plan for lessening our call on that river. So without further ado, the person who knows so much about our climate patterns, I want to introduce Dr. Michael Anderson, our state climatologist. He also happens to, I think, hail from Boulder, Colorado. So he knows, in addition to knowing a lot about California, he knows a lot about the Colorado River watershed. So over to you, Mike.
All right. Thank you, Director Namath. If we could go to the next slide. All right, just a little geography. Looking at a watershed of 246,000 square miles, producing an average annual runoff of 15 million acre feet, and that's for the upper basin. The reason why we focus on the upper basin, at Lee's Ferry, the transition between upper and lower basin, now Lake Powell and Glen Canyon Dam. This is the water that was apportioned between the upper and lower basin states. And when you talk about the Colorado River, you talk about the upper basin versus the lower basin. And over on the left, you see we have Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico considered the upper basin states. Lower basin states, Arizona, Nevada, and California. The outlet is in Mexico into the Gulf of California. Snowmelt, a big part of this watershed, even though most of it is desert. More than 6 million acre feet of runoff comes from snowmelt. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so what's been happening and how big is that drought? So if we look at the period of record, starting before 1910, we go 1910 to beginning of the 21st century, period of record average flow was 15 million acre feet, right on that amount that was designated to be partitioned between upper and lower basin states. Unfortunately, since the 21st century began and that drought began, it's a fairly significant reduction. Only 12.5 million acre feet of water on average has been coming out of the basin. That's a good 20% reduction in flows. We see then just some dates in time, the 1922 compact establishing the 7.5 million acre feet for the upper and lower basins. And then in 1994, that treaty with Mexico committing 1.5 million acre feet to Mexico for their use. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so drought in the basin. What's been happening? Well, one of the things in the 21st century, we're really warm. And when it's really warm, the atmosphere can take more water. And one of the ways we measure this is with a value called climatic water deficit. And this is really good for arid regions where the landscape doesn't have enough water to move into the atmosphere. And when that atmospheric demand is more than the landscape can provide, you create more stress on the environment. So values above zero of climatic water deficit indicate those times where the landscape's under stress. Time stress below zero, landscape's a little less stressed. And so we see through time since 1950 in this particular study from a colleague who worked at the USGS and has moved on to a company called Earth Knowledge. There was some early stress, then a period of wetness, but then since the 21st century, that stress has just skyrocketed. And you see both upper and lower basin. Top graphic is the upper basin, peaking at around 500 millimeters, half a meter of water. Look at the lower basin. It goes over a meter. Lower basin's lower elevation, hotter, drier. Lots of challenges being experienced on the Mother Nature side of the balance sheet here. I believe this is my last slide. So from here, I will give it back to Secretary Crowfoot.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike and Carla. So Mike, the one takeaway is that we are going through a period of drought, which means that the basin is producing less snow and rain than, as you pointed out, what's been historically split up across all the water users. So we're in deficit. What's your take on the future given climate change? Is there a clear indication that this drying period is going to continue? What uncertainty exists? What's your take?
Right. So we've seen since the beginning of the 21st century, things have gotten warmer here in the West. And the West really is tracking about that global projection of warming. So if you look at that projection, that matches what we're experiencing. And our expectations are exactly that we keep warming. Now, some of the challenge when you keep warming, the air can hold more water. If it can hold more water, there's more demand to pull water away from the landscape, meaning that landscape's drying out even further. Now, another part of climate change, storms become bigger, spaced out further. When it's not getting wet, it's drying out. And if you're missing any windows of those, then you have longer windows of dryness. Now, on top of that, our snowpack is getting smaller. And another challenge in the Colorado River Basin is blowing dust. Dust from the desert's being blown up onto the snowpack. Makes it melt earlier, meaning you have that longer period of dryness in the basin to stress the landscape even further. So a lot of forces working to make things more challenging in the basin, to be sure.
So key takeaway for a non-scientist like me is if we're going to be prudent about our future water supply, we have to do more with less. In other words, anticipate continued deficit compared to historic times. Carla, I want to ask you a question. It was just a few years ago where you and I and others were navigating 5 million Californians underwater rationing as a result of one of these, worsening droughts that we're experiencing as a Mediterranean climate. How important is Colorado River water to California, given that we have other sources of water, including that which drains off the Sierra Nevada into the Sacramento and San Joaquin River systems? What's your take as sort of our key person that's working to build our water resilience into the future?
Yeah, and so that's a great question, and I'm sure you'll hear a bit of this from Shivaji at Metropolitan. But this water supply for Southern Californians, for Metropolitan, it's about 30% of their supply. I already spoke a bit about IID, and of course, we also have real issues down at the Salton Sea, which is related to how California, if you will, manages its Colorado River. But we know that into the future, like lots of what Mike is describing on the Colorado, we've certainly been experiencing very similar circumstances on our own system here in Northern California. And so when you are, working to provide water supply for 40 million people like the Colorado River, or 27 million people like the State Water Project, Metropolitan supplying it for 19 million people, you have to start understanding what resiliency means when we think about these big watersheds. How do you capture that water when it becomes available? As Mike also mentioned, you really need to be ready, prepared for these bigger storms that are going to come in, because if you aren't ready to capture them and store that water underground, recycle that water, use it more efficiently, then the potential for slipping into a drought that is consequential to human health and safety. That is why we had rationing in California a couple of years ago. It can become consequential very quickly to not just the California economy, but people, their quality of life, and certainly our environment. So we all have to be paying attention to how we manage drying conditions. That is really I hesitate to call it a phenomenon because it's not, right? We know quite a bit about what's generating it, things that we need to do, but it is affecting the entire Western United States. And even though California has some of the most variable water supply in the US, if not the world, that kind of aridification is affecting the way in which water or precipitation that comes and its availability to manage for lots of beneficial uses in the state.
Super helpful. And we spent a lot of time anticipating what we can expect from our different watersheds. And my takeaway is yes, we need to do with less Colorado River water across the basin moving forward, but that it will remain an important part of our water supply, which is why this negotiation period is so crucial in the next 20 years. So speaking of that, we're going to bring on JB Hamby. JB is an elected leader of the Imperial Irrigation District, which is a farming district getting its and water district in Imperial getting 100% of its water from the Colorado River Basin. And JB, you're also chair of our Colorado River Board of California, which is really important in these negotiations. So first of all, welcome. I understand you're coming to us from Washington, D.C. Talk to us, explain a little bit about what the Colorado River Board is, because that's really important to what's happening right now.
Sure thing. I appreciate it, Wade, and may have some slides here in a moment. But the Colorado River Board of California was formed in 1937 to represent the unique rights and interests of the state of California in Colorado River discussions, protecting our collective rights to 4.4 million acre feet a year, the largest and most significant and some of the most protected rights in the basin. And importantly, what the Colorado River Board does is represent the unique makeup of all of our individual users within California. That ranges from agricultural to urban, to state agencies, to public members, and importantly, for the first time as well, tribal members. So as you'll hear from a couple of our important agencies that are seated on the board, the Coachella Valley Water District, both agricultural and urban, the Imperial Irrigation District, which Carla mentioned a moment ago, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, who is a member as well, the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, the largest water wholesaler in the United States, Palo Verde Irrigation District, who holds the oldest and rights that were perfected on the lower Colorado River, the San Diego County Water Authority, a member agency of Metropolitan, but also an important partner with the Imperial Irrigation District in large-scale ag-to-urban water conservation partnerships. We also have membership from the Department of Water Resources and Fish and Wildlife, and former President Joaquin of the Fort Yemaquetzan Indian Tribe, as well as Frank Ruiz, another member of the board as well. We'll go to the next slide here. And importantly, what the board does in the way that California is represented, and this dates back to the 1922 Compact. The way the compact was negotiated is each state was charged to appoint a commissioner to represent that respective state's rights and interests, as well as their respective advisors that participated in that process to figure out how we would negotiate a Colorado River Compact, which, as earlier mentioned, split the river in two. Essentially, it created an upper basin of the four upper basin states, and then us here in the lower basin is California, as well as Arizona and Nevada, and created an important treaty between our states at the seven-state level. And while the compact was negotiated and is still in force and effect, we've maintained this process since that time. So in California, the chairman of the Colorado River Board is elected and serves as California's Colorado River Commissioner. And in my case, has the responsibility of not unilaterally seeking deals and agreements with our lower basin, seven basin state and federal partners, but to coordinate within California as well to establish a collective unanimous California position that looks out for each of our individual water agencies and water right holders, but also represents the entire interests of the state of California in these discussions. So as part of those discussions, we have to negotiate amongst ourselves in California, establish that collective position, as well as our lower basin state, federal, and partners in Mexico as well, but do so in a way that maintains a strong negotiating position for our state, managing and balancing, protecting our rights and interests, but also establishing something that involves some level of give in order to get to a consensus deal that makes sense for California. And then adding on top of that, those Venn diagram circles, we also have to do something that makes sense, like you heard from our state climatologist, something that makes sense with what the climate and the science supports. And I'll
Got
close
it.
out on this next slide here, which is California's need. You've all identified it well earlier, which is 600,000 acres of year-round farming, 365 days a year in the Imperial Valley, Bard Valley, Fort Yuma-Quetzal Indian Tribe, Coachella Valley Water District, even in San Diego area. We have highly productive farmland in production all year round, some of the most high value and productive in the basin. Half of the population lives within Southern California, and this essential Colorado River water supports $2 trillion in economic production. All of these things we're charged and tasked with protecting, while at the same time getting to a consensus deal that makes sense for our state, our users, and the people of our state. Thanks, Wade.
Yeah, really helpful background. So as I shared at the top, we're really at a crunch time for the Colorado River. My understanding is that it's really this year is the window of time that we have to work with the other states, come up with a compromise approach to manage water in coming years. Carla and I, of course, work for Governor Newsom, who is driving us very hard on supporting your efforts to actually find a compromise, recognizing that the alternative is conflict and potential litigation. At the same time, we read through the media that, there's a lot of highlighting of the disagreements between the different states, and we're not there. So give us a gist of like what is California's position and approach going into this negotiation and really right now, and really where do we stand on the compromise or lack thereof?
Thanks, Wade. As Carla mentioned, there's this whole series of compacts, contracts, agreements, Supreme Court decrees that collectively define the law of the Colorado River, as it's called. And California is uniquely benefited and protected by this. Nonetheless, we as California aren't just sitting on our laurels. We recognize what the climate is able to support, what's necessary, and what we recognize is that it's better to be able to work something out across the negotiating table, do something that makes sense and protects our users and the people and agriculture in our state, while at the same time, and as a result of that, getting a seven-state agreement that also protects those interests. So we've been committed to a collaborative, constructive approach to these discussions and these negotiations. There are some key sticking points that have been an issue here while we're trying to step away from and not argue legal positions and theories because that doesn't move conversations forward. What we recognize, though, is there's some key factors that really matter for us in California and for our partners in the lower basin in Mexico as well, which is how much water is released out of Lake Powell, firstly. This is our entirety of our Colorado River supply. It has to come out of Lake Powell, then into Lake Mead, and then down to our users. And as mentioned earlier, some of our users in California are exclusively dependent on the Colorado River. That includes the Bard Water District, Imperial Irrigation District, Palo Verde Irrigation District, Fort Yuma-Quetzal Indian Tribe. We also have, for Metropolitan and Coachella Valley Water District, both state water project contractors and have local state supplies as well. Colorado River has been the bedrock in the history of the formation of these communities that have been supported by our Colorado River supply. So that is a key issue for us, how much water is released out of Lake Powell, doing so in a sensible, sustainable way, but that is the basis of our Colorado River supply. Secondly is water in reservoirs above Lake Powell, how that gets released into Lake Powell so that Lake Powell can make the sustainable and reasonable releases that we need to be able to live on and sustain on in the lower basin states in Mexico. And importantly, is we're managing with the amount of water that we have. That means that we need to sustainably manage the storage that makes its way into the system, but we also need to be prepared for shortage when the amount of water isn't enough to supply existing demands. So we in California, with our lower basin partners, have stepped up and offered 1.5 million acre feet a year, along with our partners in Mexico, to stabilize the situation at Lake Mead, but recognizing that's not going to cut it in all hydrologic scenarios. More will have to be done, and we look forward to doing that as a 7 basin and 2 country approach to additional reductions that are necessary in order to maintain the sustainable mass balance of the system.
Really helpful. So one takeaway is, Mike Anderson, our climatologist, showed that delta, that difference between sort of the allocations as they exist and the amount of water that's actually materializing. Your point is that between Arizona, Nevada, and California, our water agencies across the 3 states have stepped up and said, we will reduce usage by 1.5 million acre feet, which is a big portion of that deficit. But you also make the point that more is needed. And I've heard you talk about, both privately and publicly, the importance of all 7 states actually contributing to reduced usage. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And California is perhaps one of the best examples within the basin from one year to the next. In the early 2000s, California permanently reduced our uses by 800,000 acre feet a year. We've stepped up even more recently to, as part of a longer term deal, as a larger package, reduce our state's pull on the Colorado River by another 10%, 440,000 acre feet a year. California, as mentioned earlier, has some of the most significant interests and rights that produce great economic value and a large population. We know that we're able to do this in California. We know it's possible throughout the basin as well. We can't do it alone or ourselves, but what we need to do moving forward to live with the river that we have, not the one we may wish for, is that it's going to take everyone chipping in and making the necessary reductions to balance the supply that we have with the demand that we need moving forward.
Yeah, really well explained. So talking about solutions, I want to bring on our next panelist, Sivaji Deshmukh. Sivaji is the general manager of Metropolitan Water District. And Sivaji, you provide water to a population of, almost 20 million people, which is larger than most American states. If you could talk about just how you view the Colorado River in this water portfolio, water supply, and importantly, how has Metropolitan really leaned in to bring the river into balance?
Great. Thanks, Secretary. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to participate on this panel. And I want to express my and Metropolitan's appreciation to Chair Hamby for representing us so well at the negotiating table. As you can tell, he really represents the state with a priority to make sure that our interests are protected. As you pointed out, Secretary, Metropolitan is the largest water district in the nation, representing approximately half of the population along the Colorado River. It is an extremely important supply to us. Metropolitan was founded by creating the operation to bring Colorado River water over to Southern California. And half of the water that's used in Southern California comes from both the Colorado River and Northern Sierra, which is what we essentially call imported water here. However, when California is in a drought, up to 70% of the region's imported water supply comes from the river. So as you can hear from that, it's an extremely crucial supply for us. When we think about the negotiations that take place along the river, it's extremely important we protect this vital inflow to our region, as it's helped sustain the economy here for our 19 million residents. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we've done and where we need to go. And California, and specifically Metropolitan Service Area, has made a tremendous commitment to demand management or ways to conserve water. And we've coupled that with the development of drought-proof local supplies, all to increase our own reliability, but also as part of recognizing that we're part of a bigger system on the Colorado River, and it's important that we do our part. We have invested nearly $1 billion in programs to save our region through rebates, new technologies, and partnering with our local water districts. We've also invested almost $750 million in these local supply projects that literally take away our sales, but allow for reliability for the region. And to me, that's a reflection of the partnership ethic that Metropolitan has. As an example, everyone on this webinar is a partner to Met, and Met's a partner to them. And it is baked into the fabric of how we see solutions going forward, is partnerships along the river. I do want to talk a little bit more about what we've done in the region. While we've seen population increases, we've seen our demand significantly reduced. Our per person potable water consumption in Southern California has dropped over 40% over the last 30 years. The region has cut its imported water use in half since 1990, from about 2.5 million acre feet down to almost 1 million acre feet. And yet the population has increased by 4 million. How have we done that? As I mentioned before, through a lot of innovation and partnerships, including turf rebates, where we've been able to remove 230 million square feet of grass, which is roughly about 80,000 homes per year demand. So you can see it has a big impact by making these investments. We've also, going back to the partnership concept, have not pitted ourselves against flows of water in the environment or for agriculture, but rather figured out ways to partner, whether it was looking at ways to partner with the state on programs to better balance water supply throughout the state of California, or very unique and agency-specific partnerships with our agricultural partners, including IID, Coachella Valley, and the Quetzon Tribe. But that doesn't mean that we're stopping there. We need to do more. We know that without a consensus approach to these negotiations, we could be left with some really severe cuts along the river. So while we want to continue to advocate on behalf of Metropolitan, we also continue to invest more in conservation, including another $35 million in local supply programs, and really focusing on what we can do to make sure that our demand is managed off that river. Next month, as an example, the Metropolitan Board will be considering the environmental impact report certification for the Pure Water project, a potentially 150,000 acre feet of new recycled water that could help provide reliability and reduce our demands. I'm happy to answer any other questions, Secretary, but just wanted to give that brief intro about Metropolitan.
Really helpful. And it's incredible and a point of pride for me doing my work that greater Los Angeles, actually all of Southern California, has become that much more water efficient. Kind of an amazing stat that the population has grown while the water footprint has shrank. Let me just ask you a spontaneous question, given our working relationship over the last several weeks as you've taken this leadership role. How bullish are you about this solution and these negotiations? Do you feel like the states and the water agencies can find a pathway moving forward?
I'm a practical optimist, Secretary, so it's important that we stay positive about this. What I've been impressed with is a willingness to be open and to have the 7 basin states coordinate through Chair Hamby and let us all know what they're looking for. Another reason I'm optimistic is that the coordination that's taking place within California with your and Chair Hamby's leadership is well coordinated. And it's very important that we communicate what investment our ratepayers have provided. And I'm very confident that that's being communicated to both our partners in the lower basin as well as the upper basin. So I stay positive on that. I know we have deadlines coming up, whether that's the February 14th or the comments due on the federal environmental review document. And so we're working hard to make sure that our interests are well represented in those comments back.
Fair enough. Big thanks for all you're doing. Let's turn to one of your colleagues, Robert Chang, who helps to run water management at the Coachella Valley Water District. Robert, as JB explained, you're a district that provides both water for communities in the Palm Desert, think east of Palm Springs, as well as growers, folks that are providing the food that we eat. Interested in Coachella Valley Water District's perspective on the Colorado River and specifically these negotiations.
Well, thank you very much, Secretary, and appreciate the opportunity to kind of tell Coachella's story. And what's nice being later in the program is that a lot of the materials have already been covered. So we're certainly not the oldest water rights holders on the river, and we're not the largest. But we do serve a unique space in the sense that we do have a good, thriving agricultural economy, as well as over 100,000 municipal and industrial accounts. So with that, we also serve as the groundwater manager, for our basin. So our service area is 1,000 square miles in the Coachella Valley. And I think early on, we recognized that, the groundwater that we have here was a limited resource. And in order to kind of have a sustainable future, for our residents and our activities out here, there needs to be another source to help augment what Mother Nature doesn't provide. Because we usually get about 3 inches of rain annually. I think Washington, D.C. probably got more than that just within a space of a couple of hours last week. So in order to do so, we really depend pretty heavily on the Colorado River Basin. It's a significant part of our water portfolio. The other part is the State Water Project, but just to kind of put some numbers to the importance, the Colorado River supply actually makes up 75% or more on an annual basis of our imported water portfolio. And despite holding senior Colorado River water rights, we also very much understand the importance of working these issues out collaboratively. And so everything I think Chairman Hamby and Shivaji talked about, I think we're completely supportive of, for California. I think the other issue I wanted to maybe talk a little bit about is, the conservation. And the importance of conservation as a tool in our toolbox to help more efficiently use this precious resource. Our water conservation efforts have been kind of targeted towards two things. I think one is the groundwater sustainability principally, but in return, we're looking at reducing imported water supply to be brought into Coachella Valley, both from the Colorado River and also our other imported water supply. So on the Colorado River conservation, I just want to highlight a few key programs that we have implemented. One is the Coachella Canal lining, which lined probably call it 80 miles of canal, and this actually started in the 1980s and finished up in 2005. So we're able to conserve almost 160,000 acre feet annually, which is roughly half of our annual allocation on the Colorado River under federal contracts. And to date, since the determination, the beginning of the project, we've actually conserved over 6 million acre feet that's been put to use beneficially elsewhere. We've also adopted drip irrigation pretty widely, through our service area. Our acreage is about 70,000 acres of very productive farmland. And the switch from flood to drip irrigation has been largely funded by our users. So they see the importance of water use. And through this effort, we estimate basically in tens of thousands of acre feet that could be saved annually. And then more recently, we've been active participants with other California parties on the reclamation's call for conserving water on the Colorado River that essentially started in 2022. And to date, we saved, on top of everything else, over 100,000 acre feet, to help back it up in Colorado River to stabilize the system. And then I also want to just kind of highlight, our groundwater conservation efforts, for our municipal customers, turf rebates and so on. I think we've invested over $17 million, worth of rebates from our ratepayers to help fund those. So in closing, I think we believe these actions kind of highlight our commitment to working out solutions, and we hope to be an active voice going forward as we go, towards a stable 2026 world.
Yeah, big thanks, Robert. Coachella Valley, Metropolitan, California water agencies have really been leaders on driving conservation and getting it done using less water to continue to provide for our communities and economy. And it's been really gratifying to see water agencies from other states come to California and visit these programs. Because as you pointed out, these aren't just programs that are starting or thought about or in concept. I mean, you all have implemented them and with real savings. Both conservation programs and this infrastructure, things like canal linings, really quite important and something that we're advocating be applied across the basin as part of doing more with less. So big thanks there. I want to bring on our last panelist, Frank Venegas. And the Quetzal tribe has been living in the lands on either side of the Colorado River in what we now know as Southern California since time immemorial. And the Quetzal tribe has among the most senior water rights, quite appropriately, on the river. Frank, huge thanks for your tribal government's leadership and partnership as full partners to us navigating what's the pathway moving forward. I'm interested in your perspective from the tribe in terms of resilience moving forward and how you view, your role on the Colorado River and the role of tribes in this broader discussion.
All right, thank you for having me, Secretary Crowfoot. I want to start off by just showing you our Great Seal. Our Great Seal in it itself says, "Together we progress." And you can see there's farm fields, two individuals standing there next to the Colorado River. I think it's important that we remember as we move forward that we're all in this together. We have to develop partnerships. If we have some partnerships already, to make them stronger as we move forward into this next era of the negotiations. I want to thank JB out there for representing the region, the Quetzal tribe, and everything that we're trying to do. Right now, at this stage, having tribes sit at the table and being able to help alleviate some of these issues is important to us. I do have a couple of slides I'd like to show. If we could pull one of them up, please. Just so everybody knows where we're at, we cover about 45,000 acres, and we are on the eastern boundary. We're on the border of Yuma, Arizona, and Mexico. So we literally see the last of the river before it crosses our international border. Next slide, please. And part of it is where we're located, we get some of our water from the All-American Canal, but we also get the majority or some of our water from the Colorado River. And one thing I want us to always remember, us as a tribe, that we still rely on the river for our cultural practices. So it's important to us that we have a living river to continue practicing all of our cultural traditions that we've had since the beginning of time. We use the All-American Canal to irrigate about 7,000 acres of farmland. And of that, can I get the next slide? We're trying to make infrastructure improvements to help us get the water to these locations. And some of it is canal lining. As you can see on the photograph here on the left, we had an earthen canal, which used to lose water to seepage, the growth of the plants on the side, slow down the water delivery system. And we collaborated with Bard Water District to line that section of the canal. It reduced the footprint from about 50 feet wide to 27 feet, saving about 800 acre feet of water. That was my last slide. And I want you to remember with some of the partnerships that we do have with Metropolitan Water District, Blue Commons, and Bonneville Environmental Foundation to help fund some of these infrastructure improvements. And for the Quetzal tribe, the water savings that we got from the infrastructure improvements, we in turn use that for the restoration process. Because we need a living ecosystem, a living river for us to continue to go on. And that's one of the big things that we're worried about when we move forward. Not to forget that we also rely on the living river, not just for the agricultural practices, but also for our culturally practices as well.
Well, Frank, huge thanks both for giving us a sense of what the tribal government is already doing and the role you see the river playing moving forward. And just, it's been huge to be partners in this work. So big thanks there. Let's bring everybody back on the screen for our final 10 minutes. And we got a question coming in about the federal government and specifically discussions that are taking place later this week. Carla and JB and I are headed back to be part of a meeting with the Interior Secretary, and this has been publicly advised here, so no secrets being shared, but the Interior Secretary is bringing together the governors and their administrations of the 7 states really to drive forward an agreement, given that one hasn't been achieved around the negotiation table. And so I am interested, maybe JB, if you want to go first and just give us an understanding a little bit more of like the role that the federal government plays in this and what your expectation is for coming weeks moving forward. And then would like to get Carla's take as well.
Sure thing. Thanks, Wade. So the administration through the Department of Interior, as well as the Bureau of Reclamation, are charged with some important responsibilities. They are responsible for managing the reservoirs throughout the Colorado River system. The two big ones that Carla mentioned, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, largest reservoirs in the country, as well as other ones that operate upstream of Powell. In addition to their responsibility to manage those reservoirs, they also have an important responsibility as the water master in the lower Colorado River Basin and have the responsibility for working out shortages, which historically have been done through agreement. So in addition to that, the federal government, dating back to when the compact was being put together, and that process was chaired by a sort of a neutral facilitator at the time named Herbert Hoover, who was a Commerce Secretary. And to this day, the administrations, as they come through, have this important role in sometimes knocking heads together, sometimes encouraging consensus, having diplomatic discussions between the states to be able to move conversations forward. So this Friday, as you mentioned, we will be gathered with counterpart governors throughout the basin, the individual state commissioners and negotiators, and Secretary Burgum and his administration's team who are meeting as we count down the clock to February 14th, Valentine's Day, which is also the deadline that they've put forward for a 7-state agreement. I mentioned some of the key issues that are outstanding at this time. I think more recently, the administration has leaned in and putting some different options on the table that certainly, I think, in our point of view in California, has been helpful. Continued just sort of back and forth between the basins really hasn't been moving the ball forward, but having sort of this important role that the federal government can play in helping to broker solutions between the states is helpful when the solutions are not emerging on their own.
Yeah, I agree. Carla, what are your hopes and expectations for these discussions and the role that now as the secretary tries to bring in the governors and their administrations into this discussion?
Sure. Well, on negotiations that are this complex and where so much is at stake, I think it's a time-honored tradition to wait until the very last minute. So we really take this as a signal that the federal government wants to push this over the finish line. I think ordinarily in these situations, there's kind of a high degree of posturing, but people know, and I think people know what it takes. And it's really having the federal government show up and with the full force of the secretary to enable people to put solutions on the table. If it were easy, it would have been done. But I also want to supplement what JB was saying about the role of the federal government. We're really going to be counting on them to really modernize and lean into better forecasting, making sure that we understand lots of things we're doing in California, just making sure we understand soil moisture, for example, so that we can get used to a new kind of predictability, if you will, and make better water management choices. And reclamation is very much in the lead of establishing that with obvious input from all of the parties. So I'm also really looking forward to that. I'm planning for success. I'm also, like Shivaji said, I'm a practical optimist. We have to come to resolution here. And I hope it's just the beginning of a big thrust in really understanding and adapting to climate in the West.
Totally agree. And I'll just mention the potential of federal investments in infrastructure across the basin. There's about $1 billion of resources at the federal government that it could invest in solutions that essentially lead us toward an agreement. Our colleagues today shared one clear infrastructure investment, lining canals to reduce leaking of water into canals. Sivaji shared the benefits of recycled water, using water more than once. And Carla, big thanks for your vision to help us think about like where can infrastructure investments actually help us do more with less in California and across the basin. That'll be a really important part of this. I don't want to forget Mexico because Mexico also is entitled to a portion of this river. So, JB, in a succinct explanation, can you explain how Mexico figures into this agreement?
Absolutely. There is a 1944 treaty with Mexico that grants Mexico 1.5 million acre-feet a year of Colorado River water. It also provides that Mexico would take prorated reductions on par with U.S. users in a time of shortage. Mexico, the way we've been able to work together over time is through minutes. They're basically sort of little mini updates to the treaty, done informally, but are essentially are agreements between the U.S. and Mexico. This has involved the states over the past number of years since the 2007 guidelines have been in place. Mexico, historically, every time we've needed to step up as a basin, they've always been there too. It's very important that they're an early component of this process. We continue to urge our federal partners to get engaged and open up that space with Mexico to begin these discussions. They're important, and Mexico has always been a good partner as we've worked with them over the past number of years.
That's great to know. So as we come to the conclusion of this discussion, I should mention we had upwards of 600 people join us here today. I want to do a speed round, and the speed round question that you can answer in a phrase is, what do you want to see more of in the Colorado River Basin moving forward to address this challenge we have? JB.
I'll give you one word for speed: compromise.
Frank.
Together we progress.
There it is. Unity. Robert.
I would say understanding.
Sivaji.
Partnerships.
Carla or Mike, any final thoughts here?
Say focus.
Yeah.
Future's in our hands. We got to focus. Mike.
Adaptability.
Yes, adapting to the future. And I'll take Carla's word of focus, which is we have sleeves rolled up, figuratively and literally, and really digging in on behalf of the governor to support JB and our water agencies on finding a solution. We know that the future is going to be better when the 7 states actually decide the path forward versus punting to the federal government or, at worst, getting mired in litigation, which really characterized so much water management over the last century in the basin. So we're really focused with working across states, lots of conversations, really refreshing that this is not a partisan issue. We've got colleagues in Republican, Democrats, North and South that are really working to make this solution happen. So big thanks to everybody for joining. I have one last slide, and that is our next speaker series in celebration of Black History Month is next week, where we're going to talk to some really remarkable leaders, Black leaders who are driving the environmental movement and conservation movement across California. So please join us. And last slide. If you have follow-up questions on our discussion here today, or suggestions for us or future conversations of our speaker series, please hit us up on this email, secretarysuggestions@resources.ca.gov. Big thanks everybody for your partnership moving forward. Lots of work to do.